Hi, I'm Whitney Donhauser, the Ronay Menschel Director and President of the Museum of the City of New York. Thank you all so much for joining us this evening for Your Hometown, a conversation with Darryl McDaniels of Run-DMC. This is the first event in our series of programs which accompany the podcast Your Hometown, which is hosted by historian Kevin Burke. The podcast has officially launched today. You can learn more about the project and listen at yourhometown.org. We have been so thrilled to work with Kevin on both the podcast as well as the series of accompanying conversations. Your Hometown is a podcast series about growing up in a time and place and how where we're from shapes who we are. New York City is the first hometown he'll explore, with more than 20 guests who came of age in and around the 5 boroughs. Tonight, we're thrilled that Darryl McDaniels, of famed hip-hop group Run-DMC, could join us for this inaugural conversation in our series. I'll welcome Darryl and Kevin to the screen in just a few moments. So Your Hometown is presented in partnership with the Museum of the City of New York, and it's made possible in part with support from the Rockefeller Brothers Fund and other generous donors. We hope that you'll join us for the next 2 events in this series. On Sunday, March 7th, we'll be joined by the playwright Lynn Nottage, and on Thursday, April 8th, we'll be joined by the fashion designer Danielle Guzio. So check out mcny.org/your hometown for more information and to register. I want to thank all of you who were able to donate for tonight's event. We really appreciate your support of the museum right now as we continue to navigate these very challenging times. So a little bit about the logistics tonight. We'll be taking questions through the program via Zoom's question function. If you'd like to get out as many of your questions, we'll hope to get to as many of your questions as we can. If you're watching on Zoom, you can use the closed caption function, which is available at the bottom of your screen. Now, to kick things off, we're going to share with you a short trailer of the podcast, Your Hometown, and then I'll turn things over to Kevin. So Kevin Burke is the founder and CEO of Kevin Burke Productions, Inc., a New York-based film company and director of research at the Hutchins Center for African and African American Research at Harvard University.
In our first season, 7, 8, 9, all the other kids in the theaters, it's all kids. But most of them are older than me, and they're rougher. And here comes my grandmother. She's the oldest person by 40 years in that theater. And she gets so carried away when the monster finally gets flamethrowed or immolated, or I remember standing up once and saying, "Good for you, you bastard. How does that feel?" You know, she was so,
I'm Kevin Burke, and my new podcast is about growing up. Wherever you are, you come from a specific place and time, surrounded by characters who are larger than life. In our first season, everybody we meet is different, but what they have in common is they were all young at some point in the same town.
Good old New York. Baby, oh baby, boogaloo down Broadway.
We're doing this with the Museum of the City of New York, and the premise is that when you're young, things happen to you that you never, ever forget.
It was at night, and I was in my bed, and he thought that I was asleep, and he came into my room. I could tell he was crying, which I had never seen. Had never seen.
Where we're from can haunt us, or be the place where we first learn to express ourselves.
Give me a piece of paper. Alfred, give me. I gotta do that.
you know, if you want to look for somebody after they're gone, you look around in the places where they were. You look around the grass and the fields. Where would you be? Where would we find you?
Where I be? Where?
This is Your Hometown, a new podcast series coming on February 2nd. Find us online at yourhometown.org or wherever you get your podcasts.
Hey, hi everyone. Welcome to this evening's program. It's good to see you. Darryl, how are you doing tonight?
Hello. What's happening? I'm good.
Good to see you again.
Good seeing you.
It's hard to introduce you. I think for so many people who are watching, you are a fixture on the landscape of their own childhoods. You know, everyone can remember where they were when they first heard that incredible sound
Right.
of Run-DMC. And so you're part of the landscape of our lives. And so it's great to see
Right.
you, legendary artist, such an important figure in our city. And so it's great to see you again. Thank you for joining me and all of us.
Thanks for having me.
I was thinking the last time that we met, it was in
Mhm.
July, and we were sat down to have this conversation that we recorded for episode 1 of the podcast. And we were just coming off the worst months of the pandemic.
Yeah, I remember
Kind of
that.
like breathing a little sigh of relief that we'd gotten through
Yep.
the worst of it. And
Yep.
there you and I were, taking our masks off, distanced, and sitting across from one another
At the
We met-
museum.
at the museum.
Yeah.
We ended up speaking for 4 hours. It was just
That's
epic
crazy.
conversation. It was crazy. And we covered so much ground. And I remember afterward going home just vibrating. Like, it was so exciting and powerful and enduring. And it really stayed with me for a long time. And I think that comes across in the podcast. But I was wondering, when you left our conversation and went home, and in the days and months that followed, what stayed with you? And having spent that much time talking about being a kid again, right, in the city, did it bring?
What stayed with
you? Yeah.
What stayed with me was that all of those feelings and emotions never die. I think we get in a bad habit of saying, I can't think like that no more. I can't do that no more. I can't be that no more. But we don't realize that we are all those things. So when I left it, I was like, man, I ain't got no reason to be depressed. You start remembering the beauty of experience and discovery. You start remembering the beauty of lessons that you learned, people that you came in contact with that allowed you to get where you were supposed to go. So it was like, when I left, I was like, wow, in reality, those things ain't really in the past. You know what I'm saying?
Absolutely.
In reality, those things are in the now. Back then I was doing that, but back then it was your now. So when you start reliving that, you realize you still have all those energies, those joys, those questions, the anticipation, the eagerness. And that's what I left there with. It was like, yo, there's no reason to be angry.
That's good. Well, one of the things that struck me was that when you were painting a picture of your hometown, which is Hollis, Queens, growing up in the late 60s, 70s, early 80s, you talked about how you grew up on 197th Street in a working class home where both parents worked.
Different from Harlem and different from the projects and everything. Yeah, it was different.
Your parents were strict. And so one of the things was, there was a rule in your house that Darryl had to be home, right? When the street light went on.
Come on. When that light came on,
you had to be in the house. So in a way,
exactly.
A lot of people think about that period in New York as, the sound of a new sounds coming across the East River from the Bronx and Harlem. It's hip hop is being born, and a lot of that's taking place outside. But you had to be inside. And
had to be inside.
In many ways, like, while the outside was a little bit confined for you, your inside world was vast, and you had to build an imaginary world because you had to be inside. And one of the gateways for you were comic books.
Was
your
comic
first
books,
passion.
yeah.
So
And
I'm gonna ask you-
the great thing about those comic books was Stan Lee, rest in peace. He was a genius because he put New York
Yeah.
as a real
That's what I wanted to ask
place in his comic books. So what was good about that? I mean, DC was cool. Don't get me wrong. Superman. I love the Flash. I love Wonder Woman. But Gotham and Metropolis wanted to be New York. So Stan Lee was like, no, I'm putting my superheroes in New York. So New York City was it was a personality. It was, an entity in the books. But for me, I was like, so what? I gotta be in the house when the light come on. Because Stan Lee is teaching me, showing me the city in New York every day, every night. Every time I open a Marvel comic books, I saw the Lower East Side. I saw Hell Kitchen. I saw Harlem. I saw the Empire State Building. I saw the Roosevelt Island tram.
Yeah.
I saw Park Avenue. So it was like, after a while, there's no reason for me to be mad that I got to be in the house. Because your mind, your imagination, I was walking those streets just like everybody else. So it was the comic books that, even though people might say, oh, it's make-believe and fantasy, but look at those words, make-believe. Stan Lee made me believe what New York City was really like. And that was a beautiful thing. So I got a geography lesson about the city that I lived in, but I couldn't even leave the block.
And eventually you'd come to own that city,
That's crazy, right? Eventually I would walk all of those places and be prepared because Stan Lee already introduced them to me.
Yeah.
See, that's crazy too.
It is crazy. And by that
it was familiar to me, Kevin, when I got there.
Yeah.
Oh man, I saw Captain America and Falcon do this. Daredevil, this is Hell's Kitchen. Oh, I remember that from Daredevil. Oh, that's that place. And it was cool to see like the Pan Am building from back in the day. You know what I'm saying? It was little things. It was in Marvel comic book that when I finally got to go to the city, I saw it for real. Amazing.
Yeah. And in many ways, you also, in the course of your career, would make Hollis in a certain way like a superhero's, origin story, right?
Exactly.
And I thought one of the other really fascinating things, especially in the first episode of the podcast, which people can check out, you have this interesting discussion where you talk about how each of the founding members of Run-DMC, right? There's you and there's Joe Simmons and Jason Mizell. You each come from Hollis. And for people who don't know Hollis, it's a place on a map. It's like, it's all one thing to them. But when you're a kid, your world is epic, even though it's a few blocks.
Oh, yes,
right?
it's huge. It's a universe.
The universe. And you talked about how, in a certain way, where you were from on 197th, and where Jason was in the middle, and Joe at 205th,
at the end,
that you each came from a different part of that little world.
Hollis.
And as a result, you had this unique combination that defined Run-DMC and got you a record deal. I'm wondering, can you take us on a tour, that tour again, of sort of Hollis through Darryl's eyes and how the band sort of emerged from those streets and those blocks?
Yeah, I think if we all lived on the same block, we would have got boring. Run-DMC wouldn't have been that interesting. Hollis was basically a strip of, it was an avenue in lower suburban middle class Queens. It was probably from like, let's say 190th Street, 190th Street to 205th. So it was from like Jamaica Avenue. People are familiar with these places in Queens. If not, it was from Jamaica Avenue. Hollis went from Jamaica Avenue to Francis Lewis Boulevard. So I lived on 197th Street, which was the quiet side of Hollis. You know what I'm saying? Where I lived at, we didn't have the grocery store, the candy store, the dry cleaner, the supermarket, the drugstore, the barber shops. All of that was further up Hollis. So I lived in the quiet part of Hollis. That was 197th Street. Jason Mizell, J, he lived in the heart of Hollis. He lived on 203rd Street. On Jay's corner was the neighborhood pizza shop. So everybody and everything happened at the pizza shop. And Joseph Simmons, he lived on 25th, which was at the end of Hollis. So Jay lived in the heart where the barber shop, the parks, the beer house, the liquor stores, the pimps, the prostitutes, Jay was in the heart of that. I'm down on the quiet side where you can hear the birds and the trees and people mow their lawn. And Joe's end of Hollis, well, it's funny how, because Russell was like the manager in the business. Joe's end of Hollis was where all the gas stations and stores, the hardware stores. So we all lived on the same avenue, but from different areas of it. And I think that's what gave us that unique personality that contributed to the diversity of people in the group. You know, Run was Run because he ran his mouth. Shut up, Joey. Shut up, Joey. Russell was always saying, shut up, Joey. Be quiet. You talk too much. Jay was just fly because Jay was fly. Jay was the flavor of the group because every time he walked out his front door, the food was there, the music was there, the athletes was there. You know, Jay was the DJ, the basketball players. He knew all the pimps and the pushers and the drug dealers, but he also knew all the athletes. He also knew everybody in the band because he became a DJ because in high school, he played in a high school band.
Yeah.
So me being on the quiet end, I guess Joe and Jay had more external stuff that they could experience, but my things was inside of me. But because I was getting an education from comic books about what was what, who was what, and how things work, it was easy for me to fill in. Because even though I physically didn't experience these things, I mentally experienced these things. Mm-hmm. So it was just a combination of diverse upbringing, a diverse area. And area has a lot to do with it. We lived in the same neighborhood, but in different areas, so it gave us different personalities. So Jay had to be sharp because he was in the middle of it. You know what I'm saying? So Jay had to grow up at a younger age than me and Joe, and Jay was the youngest guy in the group. But if you look at the group, he comes across as the oldest. He was more mature, you know what I'm saying? So it was that dynamic of unique individuals because of unique personalities from unique situations, but we all was from the same neighborhood.
Yeah, and he was the DJ, and he was the bridge, and he was literally in the middle of the two of you.
Right. See, exactly how great he was. He was the connection. He gelled everything together. And it was like Father, Son, and the Holy Spirit. Yeah. You know, the trifecta, or you know what I'm saying, the 1, 2, 3, the ABC. You know what I'm saying? And Jay was that for me and Run. And
you had digested and absorbed all these comic books, so you also brought this flair for big stage, big personalities, you know, superhero characters. You kind of gave Jam Master Jay his identity.
Name. Yeah, he was the Jam Master.
Yeah, so kind of that fed into it too, which is really fascinating. But it's also, I thought was interesting to just learn how fate worked out, where, you know, Joe came to your comic book sale, and then a little bit later, because you guys couldn't play basketball after school, at one place you played
at the Catholic school, right? At this Catholic schoolyard, because it was safe for the Catholic school kids to play basketball at the school because you got your uniform on. We can't go to the public park.
Yeah.
But fate would have it that David McEachin in 8th grade would break the rim. So now the little Catholic school kids got nowhere to play because we can't go to the park. Hold up, wait up. My mother and father's the best. Parents, Byford and Banner, son of Byford, brother of Al. Banner's my mother, Run's my pal. It's McDaniels, not McDonald's. These rhymes are Darryl's, those burgers are Ronald's. I ran down my family tree, my mother, my father, my brother, and me. I always rhymed about my families because I thought they were the coolest people on earth, and they were. Don't worry, kids, we can go to my backyard. Yay! So that was the thing that brought Joe there to discover we both had, he was already doing the hip hop, but we both had something else in common. And
you had
that's what history.
You had those notebooks where you were writing lyrics in your notebooks, which is that was the key. And he realized this guy can write.
Them. Yes, I can use this.
I can use it.
I didn't see it as business. Joseph Simmons saw hip hop be born in his living room, because prior to recorded hip hop, Russell was promoting parties. Russell was hiring all the DJs to play clubs. He was a party promoter. So he would go get Grandmaster Flash and Kool Herc and Africa Bambaataa, bring them indoors and charge the community $5 to see what they saw free every weekend. but we had to see it. So we would pay that $5. We just saw it in the park for free. We could wait. Man, don't wait till next week to go. But as soon as you heard the music, you had to be part of it. So Joe, when he was 12 years old, he's seeing Curtis Blow in his living room, Grandmaster Flash in his living room, Starsky and Houdini, rest in peace Ecstasy, who just passed away a couple of weeks before. He would see all these guys. So Joe saw that, man, this is going to be like the Jackson 5 one day. This is going to be like Stevie Wonder one day. But for me, I was just getting it via the live tapes of the performances that people will record just from the block parties and parks. So for me, it was me. Like I used to pretend to be Captain America with my father's hammer. I used to be Captain America with the garbage can, the 10 garbage can. That's the shield. I was throwing my father's hammer. So when hip hop started coming around, I was just pretending to be like Flash. I was pretending to be like Melly Mel and all the early rappers. So I was just writing my rhymes for me. Joe was actually doing them with Curtis Blow. But when he saw what I was writing, he was like, I'm putting you in my group. And I was like, oh, because it was so foreign to me.
Yeah. And the rest is history. You know, one of the things I was thinking about lately, when you have little kids, you tend to read things at odd hours. And I was recently reading Wallace Stegner. Someone recommended him to me, and I was reading him at night. This place, he was writing about Saskatchewan and up at the Canadian border, a totally different place than New York. But he wrote in this book, Wolf Willow, this line, and I just it stood out to me, and I wanted to ask you about it. He said, I may not know who I am, but I know where I'm from. And I was thinking to myself, you know, have you ever felt that way? You know, you've had a sort of a life of seeking meaning and kind of a quest to know who you are. Who's Darryl?
Exactly.
But you're from Hollis, and everyone sort of knows that about you. And I was thinking, like, do you sometimes feel that kind of you know where you're from, even if you don't know who you are?
Yeah, even if you don't know who you are, which I didn't, because that's a whole nother story which came later. Yeah. But why do you think, even, you know, when I went through my depression and I went through rehab and therapy and stuff like that, my therapist said, D, your whole career, you was always, I'm DMC from Hollis, Queens. My name is Darryl Mack from Hollis, Queens. So if I didn't know anything about me, I knew I was from, and that was part of my identity. That was the most, and I think that's so prolific, if that's the word, because if I could say I'm from Hollis, Queens, at least I could really show you that I am. You know what I'm saying? Even though it was imagination, you know what I'm saying? And what's funny about that you asked that question, Kevin, my whole DMC was based on being from somewhere, because I created the whole King of Rock after the mighty Thor. Thor was from Asgard. His father was Odin. Mm-hmm. He had a hammer. He had a brother named Loki. So just like the rap I just said, I'm Darryl. I'm from Hollis. My father's name is Byford. I got a mic, and my brother's name is Alfred. So son of Byford, brother of Al, son of Odin, brother of Loki. So all of those things. But okay, that's all good you saying that, but I can show you. You can come see. He's really from the kingdom of Hollis. So where you're from has a lot to do with who you become.
Yeah, absolutely.
Who you will be. It has a lot to do with who you are, but it also has a dichotomy of, okay, this kid from Hollis, Queens, New York. But that also, I didn't know yet, has something to do with who I will become later. So Hollis was the, I guess I'm trying to say Hollis was the most definitive thing at the time that I could show to back up me bragging about, or me telling the world who I am. That's that kid from Hollis.
Yeah.
So once I let you know, out of everybody, that's the ball player, that's the UPS man, that's the milkman, that's the mailman, that's Miss McGillicuddy. Who's that? That's that kid from Hollis.
Yeah. It's like I am, your version of I am is I am from. I am from this place.
Exactly.
And I was thinking about your dad too.
DMC from Hollis, Queens, love eating chicken and collard greens.
Yeah. And one of the things also I was wondering about, because I guess I'm a parent of young kids, and you're a parent too, and you were a son. Like we're both similar that way. And your father, Byford's in New York, his Hollis was different than yours. And of course, your son's New York and is going to be different than yours. Exactly. And I was going to ask you, when you speak to your son in particular, or kids who talk to you,
Yep.
What do you want them to know about your New York, the time and place where you grew up? What do you want them to know that makes it what it was to you? That, you know, it's not their New York, but it's your New York.
Right. It was a place of creativity and imagination and unlimited possibilities, regardless of any difficulties. And, you know, from generation to generation, the only thing that really changes is technology. But the problems that we go through, like, you know, we had gangs, we had poverty, we had, issues with the educational system. All the parents were struggling, but we was able to take in the dirt poor ghetto, where there's death, destruction, darkness, and despair, there is some good. That's what I want them to take. So, and what's powerful about that is the guys the real pioneers who created this hip hop, they were living in the Bronx and Harlem. Now, remember, in the 70s, 60s, and 70s, and 80s, Harlem wasn't Harlem. It's beautiful now. It's been a renaissance there. Back then, it was Harlem. It was hell up in Harlem, Superfly Shaft Harlem, I'm talking about. But even in that darkness and despair, the kids, I lived in a house. My father, I had a fence, I had a backyard, we had a lawn. My father drove an electric 225, which is the poor man's Cadillac. If you couldn't get a Cadillac, you get the Buick electric 225.
Yes.
So I know a lot of people on here can relate to that when they think back in the days.
Yes.
But the kids that was living in the Bronx was burning. Harlem was hell up in Harlem. You know what I'm saying? New York City, 42nd Street wasn't Disney like it is now. You know, it was strip clubs and sex movies and stuff like that. But those kids in that darkness who had way more than me, they started talking about the importance of education. Don't do the drugs, don't be in a gang, this and that. So me, I was like, okay, this if they could do that there, I can do it here. But I'm not only going to do it here, I'm going to share and create a way out. So I want kids to, kids from any neighborhood, any borough, to understand that you may think it's hard. I come from the streets of New York, and you'll know those stories. So I don't care where you're at. If I can do it, if we can do it, so can you.
Yeah, and I feel like, I'm thinking about kids now. You know, we've just been through a snowstorm. That's the least of the things they're facing right now with the pandemic. You know, so many kids are facing isolation and uncertainty about the future. They can't almost see the future anymore, and it's a scary time for them. The isolation that has come from this terrible scourge, COVID-19.
You can utilize that isolation though. The first few days.
You knew a New York too that was on hard times. Fiscal crisis, the blackout, Summer of Sam.
Oh my goodness! Everything.
Out of that came this flowering of creativity. So I was going to ask you, when you think about those kids who might be watching tonight, who are in their home zoomed out, but there's DMC, what can you say to them and about childhood that you kind of took, that you think, speaking to them in their hometown of now? You kind of teach them.
Some of those dreams, a lot of those imaginations, a lot of what you see and experience, that is not everything that's on the internet. What I'm trying to say is, all of us in every generation, we are reflections or personifications of cultures. And what I mean by cultures, the food we eat, the TV shows we watch, the sounds we hear, the things we see, and even the things that we imagine. Like, as I sit before you, I am not just hip hop sitting here. No. From the 70s and the 80s, I'm the Brady Bunch. You know what I'm saying? I'm the Addams Family. I'm Looney Tunes. I'm Woody Woodpecker. I'm Walter Cronkite. You know what I'm saying? A little kid might be sitting around and, they know Anderson Cooper. They hear that every day in the CNN. By the time they get 16 and 17 years old, they're going to realize that Anderson Cooper grew up with them. So it's all of those things that I don't want kids to shun what other people think is not cool, because those are the very things that's going to help you fulfill your purpose and your destiny.
Yeah.
A lot of times we go away from it. It's like we opened up, Kevin. A lot of times we shy away from those childhood things because I can't do that no more.
Right.
Do not throw those away. Those are valuable treasures and pieces that will enhance. I don't care if you're going to be a CEO. I don't care if you're going to be a doctor, athlete, performer, journalist, playwright, whatever you be. The culture of your environment that you grow up in, the things that spark the things that make your heart beat fast, the things that you get excited about, those are the very things that will allow you not just to be a person, but a person of substance, creativity, and integrity. I learned a lot. It was like, when I saw the Brady Bunch, I was like, my family's like that. You know what I'm saying? And it's just those little things. And even if the Brady Bunch could be good for any kid. I don't care what race, religion, or creed you're. You watching that, the Brady Bunch made me say, oh, I'm gonna make sure I do that when I get my family. Or, I was able to say, oh, my mother and father even more stricter than Mr. Brady is. You know what I'm saying? So they're not really teaching me nothing, but I can relate to that. So I guess what I'm trying to say, all these little kids, there are things that you experience, learn, imagine that are part of your purpose and destiny, which will allow you to become the great person that you are. I'm Darryl McDaniels from Hollis, Queens. I wore glasses. I went to Catholic school and I read comic books. But I'm not just a rapper. I'm one of the greatest rappers in the universe of hip hop, not just on the radio. So if they could just value and cherish those things, I think when they do get of age, they'll be like, yo, DMC is right. It's like, when I first went in the studio, I was like, I am Ant-Man. Because I had never seen the inside of a studio look like the inside of a radio. So Run and Jay didn't notice I was pretending I shrunk down and I'm inside the radio now. And that little thing gave me the confidence to be comfortable in an environment I was never in. So cherish all of those childhood things, because, I don't want to get religious here. I'm trying to get philosophical. In the Bible, Jesus says the kingdom of heaven is like a child, where everything is just beautiful. I'll share with you and you can have, it was discovery and learning, and experience. And that's what I want kids to understand, especially when you get older. I had to realize I kind of threw all of that away when I, went through my whole alcohol syndrome.
Which you've written about, yeah. Powerfully. And the thing is, I completely relate to that. I feel like there's a phase of life where you're growing up and everything about your existence is focused on the future. Who are you going to become?
Right.
What are you going to make of yourself? And you're racing ahead. And at a certain point, like maybe in your 30s, you start to realize, oh, there are chapters now closing behind me. I've left something. And then everything I was accumulating and reaching for, in a way, you have to start to clear some of that away just to get back to the essence of what you were in your pure state.
Yes.
And I feel like for me, I could look at my life that way. And here I am now interviewing people about their childhoods, because when I was a kid, I loved just sitting at the kitchen table and talking to people. And
look at that.
And that's what I want to do now, and it's fun getting to do this. And so I relate to what you're saying, like you got to treasure those essences.
Exactly. Like people, we talked about this in a podcast.
Yeah.
I didn't go to high school in Queens. I went to high school in Harlem. I went to Rice High School, 124th Street in Lenox. Jam Master Jay and Jay and Joseph, they went to Andrew Jackson, which was like a 10-minute walk from Hollis. And people was always like, why do you, I took 3 trains and 2 buses to go all the way to Rice High School.
For kids with suburbs, crazy.
Yeah, which was a great school. They asked me, I thought, because I was smart enough to get in there, because you had to have a good grades in there. It was the all-boys Catholic high school ran by the Irish Congregation of Christian Brothers.
Oh, yeah.
Trying to come to Harlem and do something for these kids that lived in the city and stuff like that. But it was when I got to Rice High School, those kids who grew up with hip hop, So I had to discover hip hop. These kids grew up with it. So when I got there, they was letting me hear all the hip hop before rap records was even made. So now from 9th grade to 12th grade, I'm getting a crash course on what it really is. So when I graduated in 12th grade, Joe told me in 9th grade, I'm gonna put you in my group, because I was writing rhymes for me. So fate just has it, or destiny just has it. I go to school in Harlem, where all the rappers, Manhattan and Harlem is where they came from. So now Terrence Washington, he's showing me, before Melly Mel did The Message, he did this. And I'm like, what? Before Africa Bambaataa did, yeah, they was a street gang. What? They were a street gang. Yeah, man, they was a street gang. But when they started the Zulu Nation, they started doing positive stuff for the neighborhood. So imagine what that's doing to me.
You were like a foreign exchange student. You're like a student abroad.
For sure.
From Queens to Manhattan.
Yes, because it was a whole nother universe. But in 12th grade, when I graduated, that's when Run came and got me. It was all, I was prepared.
You were ready.
It was all
all your formation.
Yeah, it was all preparation. And it was just learning. Also, what was cool about learning, okay, I lived in Queens. He lives in the Bronx. He doesn't have a house like I do and this and that. But then it showed me that we were no different. See, that was another thing.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Even though we all come from different places, we are no different. We just have different experiences that makes us the individuals we are. So when all of those things just came together, I started to understand, okay, when I got in a group, I just looked at it like, okay, this is how the Avengers work. Iron Man got to get along with Thor, and Thor and Iron Man got to get along with Captain America. So it was just all of those similar things about existence that, was really interesting now that I look back on it.
Absolutely. We've got a great question here from someone who's watching, named Vanessa. She says, this is for you, Darryl. When you reflect on Hollis, you think about those years, and who had the biggest influence on you growing up? Were they kids or adults, would you say, on balance?
Probably adults. Cause it was definitely see, that's a problem now. I don't want to get into problems now. The elders, the elders, in my generation, when we was little kids, all of the adults on my block was my mother and father. It was none of that. That ain't my kid. And my mother would say, that ain't my kid. You do wrong or right, everybody is going to have a say so in it. Like the whole village raising thing. You know what I'm saying? So it was just always adults. It was the adults. And I try to tell kids now, kids think the elders are old. I say, kids, the elders ain't old. Elders is walking, living, breathing experience. So it was always an adult, even to the point now. Entertainment is a little way different now, but in the generation that I come from Hollis, the guy who was a drug dealer or a gangster, if he saw you had positive potential, he would not recruit you. He would say, young man, you get off this corner because you can go places. Or you go to school. You're going to St. Get off this corner, D. Yo, D, you don't need to be up here selling. This ain't for you, man. You got potential. But nowadays, it's like, yo, you want to be cool, don't go to school. You know what I'm saying? So negativity is being used as a false sense of power. So for me growing up, it was adults. It was experience. Now, maybe experience and wisdom was just put into the form of adults. But to answer a question, it was adults. And the way the kids help you learn is when you might not have wanted to listen to the adult because you thought they wasn't cool, but when a kid you thought was cool was doing what the adults were saying, you go right along with that. You know what I'm saying? But it came from the elders. It came from the OGs and the young Gs used to communicate. You know, there was no ageism. Like there's a lot of ageism in hip hop. You know, a lot of us that's been in hip hop since it started, we're not mad at this new generations because every generation has the music that the parents hate. Mm-hmm. It's vulgar. That's what rock and roll is about. We're not mad at what these kids are doing. We're mad at what they're not doing. See, Run-DMC, we made Circum C's, but we also made us like that. I talked about my sneakers, but I also said, be cool, go to school, don't mess with drugs and thugs, and you'll be cool. That's a message that the elders gave to me. But I took it upon myself, the place that I came from, realizing how I was treated when I was growing up, to at a young age start talking. I was talking at 18, so 17 to 6 months years old could get the message, because when I was 8, it was the elders 21 and older telling me the same thing.
Yeah. And do you think, I mean, I ask this only because my parents went to Catholic school and I grew up, was raised going to church and CCD. Do you think there's something about the Catholic school experience that made you more prone to look at your elders in that way? Because it does have that hierarchy to it when you think about the.
I guess, yes, I get, I
wondering
guess
like that role.
The role of discipline.
Yes,
They're not letting you run wild. You know what I'm saying? They ain't taking your fun away, but they're not letting you run wild. You know what I'm saying? But even with that, it was like, we had the nun we were scared of, Sister Nazaire. Remember in the Blues Brothers when they went back to the group, the boys' home, to see the nun to get her permission to go on their holy mission, and she took out the yardstick. So the famous scene in the Blues Brothers where everybody who went to Catholic school, we know a nun like that. But you also have the nuns that cater to your needs. Like I had the nun that would take I'm not supposed to read the comic book in class. It's wrong. But if I finish my work, I'm gonna put my comic book in the middle of my science book so the teacher can't see what I'm reading. But she know what Mr. McDaniels is doing. Mr. McDaniels, bring it here. So we had some teachers that would take your book and never give it back to you. They would dispose of it. Mm-hmm. But this particular nun would take it during class and Mr. McDaniel, here's your book back. Because she knew what it was doing. It's good if he's reading and stuff like that. You know what I'm saying? So it's those things that are important. So it's discipline. You know what I'm saying? Instruction, lesson, discipline is very, very important. Like even at the camp, we have the Felix Camp Felix that I do for the foster kids and stuff like that. Yeah. It's arts, it's entertainment, it's sports and recreation, but it's also discipline. You know what I'm saying? It's like, no, you shouldn't do those things because.
Yeah.
And if you don't listen, we teach them there's going to be something to pay for. Nothing in this world is free, but it's easier if you pay attention and do the right thing. So I guess adults are there for discipline, at the same time, direction. The two big D's, direction, but discipline.
Absolutely. Well, and the other thing I was going to ask you about, picking up on the D words, is destiny. You mentioned destiny before, and it's sort of a preview of part 2 of our interview, which will be coming in 2 weeks, which is interesting. If you think of part 1, it's sort of like Darryl from Hollis. This episode 1 is like you're from a place. Right. Episode 2 is identity. It's who are you, and it's the search for meaning and identity, and that's kind of part 2, which we'll be getting in a couple of weeks. And what I wanted to ask you about in terms of identity and destiny. When you were in your 30s, you had this incredible call with your parents where you were writing your memoir, you were doing research, and your mom and dad call you and tell you you're adopted. It's one of these, just like, as you described in the interview, it was a catastrophe. Like, it was like, what?
What do you mean?
Yeah, earth-shattering. And it was a secret that everyone in the family sort of knew, and then you found out. And what I was going to ask you is, from that vantage point, having lived a childhood and adolescence and all those coming of age years, and then learn later from the vantage point of an adult that what you thought was the truth wasn't quite the truth.
Right. Devastating.
And
another D.
Right. So being that you've been on this deep investigation and search for who you are, and you've seen it from both sides now, right? Sort of nature and nurture, like, who you are in terms of what you've inherited biologically and who you are, what you've inherited environmentally. How do you think about childhood, knowing what you know now, between sort of the forces of environment and culture and inheritance that you may not even know? How do you think?
Right. I think of childhood as there's people, places, and things put on this earth for you outside of your blood relatives and family to get you where you're supposed to go. And if you never meet those people or experience those experiences, you won't complete your mission. That's how I look at it. Because I think for me, most people, that discovery comes early in life. We know he's going to be a basketball player. We know he's going to be a doctor. We know he's going to be a filmmaker, this and that. We know he's going to do this and that. For me, I had to be set up as the king of rock first. Then I got to get the revelation to discover, oh no, there's more than your story than you think. So I was mature enough in the mind, body, and soul to handle it. Because everybody asked me, what if you would have found out when you would, what if they would have told you when you was younger? Which nowadays parents tell their kids when they're around 7, 8, 9, and 10. You know, it's a good thing to tell. Don't wait until he's 35 to tell him. And the bad thing about my situation is I'm in the situation of 100 other adoptees. Most of us find out on our parents' deathbed. When the parents pass away and you go back to the house and you're cleaning out stuff, I'm talking about 75% of my fellow adoptees say, D, I was cleaning out the closet of my mother and father. Yeah. Found it, and my sister, my adopted sister who was nearby, snatched the papers from me and said, no, you can't see that. Why? So the whole thing. But, you know, for me, it's your purpose and destiny is a combination. Put it like this, your purpose and destiny is a combination of locations, experiences, and decisions that have nothing to do with you. Mm-hmm. But luckily, when those revelations come, you'll be able to understand why it had to happen like that. I was going to say, if they would have told me when I was little, I was so deep in the comic books, I would have got a stick. You know how the Runaways used to be doing the Little Rascals with the little pack on a stick? That would have been me at 7 years old going on a journey, which would be a great kids book right now. You know, you discover this about them. Yeah. So I think it was it's a discovery, situations, people, places, things, and locations that allow you to become who you are. So mine was just in the reverse. Yes. You know what I'm saying? If they would have told me earlier, then I would have known, oh, what a birth mother is, and I would have probably met her earlier and this and that. No, but I had to be prepared. You know, just like I didn't get into hip hop to be famous. I was just doing it because I love. So when it was time for me to go into music business, I was prepared. Yeah. I didn't have to work as hard. And you ultimately realized you had more in common with your comic book heroes than you realized, because they exactly, because when I found out that I was adopted, all my friends said, yo, D, this is crazy. You really are some superhero thing. I'm like, what are you talking about? It was like, most superheroes are adopted. So that's why in those books, I can relate to Batman. I can relate to Spider-Man. You know what I'm saying? I can relate to Superman, because they all were adopted. They from somewhere else, but they were put in this place for a specific reason. Now, that's deep. If I would have never, what if I wasn't adopted in New York? If I never was adopted in New York, I would have never been in Hollis. Well, that's just it. So if I would have went into the music business, there would be no Christmas in Hollis. No. There would be no Christmas in Hollis if my mother didn't give me up to Viper and Banner to bring me to Hollis so I could meet Run-DMC. And even if I was in a business, I would, this is scary to think there would be no Christmas in Hollis every year for Staten Island or something. Yeah, so that's those little things are so crazy, Yeah. And your situations doesn't define who you are, you do, but those situations are part of who you are. Yeah, at a certain point, you're humbled by fate, right? And you have to sort of just bow down and say, this was the way that the story unfolded. Right, exactly. You are living it and kind of looking back at it. But I think that's the amazing thing about here's what's really crazy. I went to Harlem. I went to Rice High School in Harlem. When I found out that I was adopted, and I found out my birth mother was from Harlem, who moved to Staten Island. But then, why did I choose to go to Rice? It wasn't just because I followed my best friend Douglas Hayes there. It wasn't just because I was smart enough to get there. Something spiritually drew me back to Harlem, because when I found out that I was adopted, my mother and father told me I was born in Brooklyn. that wasn't my truth. I was born in Harlem Hospital, 6 blocks
Amazing.
from the high school that I went to every day for 4 years.
Wow.
So it's funny, Harlem, I started in Harlem, I went to Hollis, and now I'm in Hollywood. But that's mind blowing when I found, well, my mother told me I was born in Kings Hospital, Kings County in Brooklyn. No, I was born in Harlem Hospital, 124th Street. Harlem is on 124th Street in Lenox. Harlem Hospital is on 139th in Lenox. How crazy is that? It's a stretch of avenue where I have a connection to. So it's no different from the connection, and it's crazy, yo. You know what I'm saying?
That is really crazy.
Mind blowing.
Yeah, mind blowing too. Is what I love about talking with you, that your passions overflow, and they're so energizing, and your love that you can express for those comic book heroes and music that you loved as a kid are still so palpable.
I remember because
that
I remember it like yesterday.
and they're alive.
I know what the Q2 bus looks like.
Yeah.
I know what it sounds like. I know what it smells like. You know what I'm saying?
And also, so those are your essences. And I was thinking as we're sitting here, and we had a question from Krishna, who was asking what these true essences too, which is, you told us about the essences that you've carried forward. And now we talked about kind of kids growing up now, and they're going to carry their own essences forward, whatever that may be, out of this pandemic, right?
Oh, for sure.
But also, you're someone who's had this career where you are an essence for so many people too, because just the way that you have these touchstones, you are a touchstone for others. And that's sort of the other amazing thing about the space that you occupy, is that you are in your own skin, Darryl, who knows what it's like to live and breathe, but you're also DMC, who is a figure.
Part of somebody else, right?
Yeah, so it's kind of one of those,
it's like
you are part of people's hometowns story.
Yeah, I mean, it's crazy. I got a new song getting ready to come out called America. And one of the lines is Harry Chapin, Jim Croce, and Grandmaster Flash inspired me. Rock Joan Jett and Janis Joplin got this little kid hip hopping. I feel young. I'm like Neil Young. I'm not a fake one. I'm a real one. And even when I'm overseas, I'm always repping Hollis, Queens. So I'm growing up in Hollis. I'm hearing Harry Chapin and Jim Croce on the radio.
BBC Radio, right?
Yeah, New York City radio, Sly and Family Stone, Crosby, Stills, Young and Nash, all of that stuff. So all of that's inside of me, but I got nowhere to release it until this hip hop thing gives me a chance to release that, to connect it so somebody could connect with me. So, the same way Stan Lee and rock and roll, 70s rock really inspired me. In the 80s, 90s, and 2000s, somebody sitting there, Run-DMC and Steven Spielberg inspired them.
Exactly.
That's crazy, right? All from New York City. Like the 80s here in New York City was phenomenal because, historically, it's one of the most creative, innovative times. You got Run-DMC, Madonna, the Beastie Boys, the Ramones, Basquiat, Keith Haring.
Yeah, it's amazing.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
All the Nelson George, the writers, journalists, the movies,
Stephen
the
Sondheim,
fashion. Yeah. Think about the 80s New York and
incredible.
How this, these little kids from Queens was plucked right into the midst of that.
It's a beautiful thing. And I'll tell you, you inspire me, and more so than anything, I'm inspired by meeting the 7-year-old you inside of you. And passion and energy.
He's always there. And that's the funny thing. And when I went to rehab and I went to therapy, I was diagnosed with suppressed emotions. So the alcohol, I'm thinking alcohol is making me feel better and do better, but it's actually suppressing who I really am.
Yeah.
So now I don't hide that kid. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
To any adults out there, when life gets frustrating, you're worried about getting the promotion, you're worried about pitching the meeting, for any doctors going into that emergency room, think about your favorite thing when you was little, growing up wherever you was from. I don't care if it was Brooklyn, Staten Island, I don't care if it was the Bronx, I don't care if it was Manhattan. Think about one of those childhood memories. That thing will empower you to be the most successful. Man, how'd you go in there and just, how did you go in there and ace that meeting? Well, I just went in there thinking I was Fred Flintstone. You know what I'm saying? Because Fred Flintstone will come up and help you and save you. You know what I'm saying? And those are the things that I cherish now. And
That's
like I
awesome.
said in the podcast, one of the things that I remember when we was going into Manhattan for like the first time, and I was in the back seat. My brother didn't come this day because he gets car sick. So we're driving over the 59th Street Bridge, and the first time I
love that
see
movie.
the Roosevelt Island tram thing, and I start hyperventilating. And my mother's a nurse. She's like, "What's wrong? Pull over." My father's on the boy, it's crazy. I told you, what's the matter with you? And she's like, "What is it? I can't get it. I can't." And when it finally came, I was like, "Mommy, it does exist." I saw that in Spider-Man. To really see the Roosevelt Island tram going on a thing as I crossed the 59th Street Bridge. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
It's crazy. And those are the little things that, people should always, when I was, even if you come in, when I was growing up in Brooklyn, it was hard. But think about that summer when they opened the fire hydrant and how for those 3 hours before the police came and turned it off, how perfect life was. Those are empowering experiences.
No, we got to hold on to those, especially in these times.
Yes.
Darryl, I cannot think of a better kickoff to your hometown than sitting here reuniting with you on this cold evening in New York, and just so grateful for the time together. Thank you so much for being the first guest in the series, taking a chance on this series when no one knew it was going to be. It was an idea.
It's awesome. I mean, it's our hometown.
It's our hometown.
It's
and
our
so
hometown.
I encourage everyone to go check out your episode, yourhometown.org. You can listen to it on the museum's website. You can find it on any podcast app that you listen to. It's there. And part 2 of this double album with you will drop in 2 weeks. And that will be the culmination of our conversation. So thank you for being the first guest. It's been an amazing ride. I cannot thank you.
And just let everybody know the guest is going to get more fun and more interesting and more exciting as we go on.
Bar's here. You set
Yes,
the bar
we
very
are.
high, Darryl.
Exactly.
They got to bring it. All right. Thanks so much, everyone. Have a great evening. Take care. And when the pandemic's over, go visit the museum. In the meantime, check out your hometown. Have a great night, everybody. Take care. Bye, Darryl.